Thanks, Wayne. Good evening, everybody. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet this evening and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. So, I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion for ANZ Bank, and banks care about diversity. And some of you might be going, really, why? Because banks often aren't sort of known for caring about much except making a lot of money for shareholders. So what I'm here to talk about tonight is the business case for diversity. Because if it wasn't worth it from a shareholder perspective, banks and I think a lot of other companies wouldn't be as interested in diversity and inclusion as we are. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is really three main themes to help to, demonstrate my point. The first is to give you some stats, because I think you have to start by understanding actually how many people in our society are excluded from work, from financial independence and from participation in society. Because I think when I started working in diversity 3 years ago and I started to understand the statistics, I was shocked and actually pretty horrified. So I'll start there. Then I'll talk about some examples of the business case and how it can really come to life and give you a couple of case studies on that, very quick case studies. And then finally I'll talk about how do you do it. You know, what's the approach that you might want to think about taking in your organisation. So very quickly before I start giving you some stats, and Sonia knows that I'm a stats girl and I love them because I'm a banker from my origins. The first thing I want to talk about very quickly is why do companies even do diversity and inclusion? And I think there's really three stages of maturity around this. The first is very much a compliance-based approach. So employee focus, make sure we don't break any laws, make sure we don't discriminate against anybody, and it's kind of the right thing to do. The second stage of maturity or evolution, if you like, is it's actually about talent management and about making sure that we're tapping into the entire talent pool that's out there, not just the white men. And that's a really, really important component. But then the third and most, I guess, compelling case for diversity is actually the commercial value of it. Which is about really understanding and therefore being able to meet our customers' needs. It's about reducing risk. You know, there's a hypothesis that says if there'd been more women working on Wall Street, the GFC might not have been as bad as it was. And it actually helps to drive innovation. But I'm not going to say any more about innovation because one of my esteemed panellists is going to talk about innovation and I don't want to steal their thunder. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about women. There's a lot of women in the room tonight. Hands up, all the women? Okay, yeah. So it starts well. It starts really well for women and girls. So girls do really well at school. Girls do really well at university. 42% of women aged between 25 and 29 hold a university degree compared to only 31% of men. And there are more female universities out there than male university graduates out there. So overall, it's a really, really positive start. So what's the problem and why does it kind of go downhill from there? Well, the problems really start right at the beginning around salaries. So it was news to me a few years ago that the starting salaries for female graduates are 4% lower than for men. And that just doesn't make any sense to me, right? So logically, and as a data person, I say, well, how is that possible, right? Because everybody's coming out and it's a level playing field. So there's a couple of sort of schools of thought around why this happens. Firstly, it's because women and girls tend to be more attracted to getting degrees and going into roles that tend to be more female dominated, such as teaching, nursing, those kinds of things, because they think it will be more family friendly for them later in life. There's also anecdotally evidence that says that women aren't as good at negotiating salary as what men are. A very sobering fact actually is that it will take 118 years for us to achieve pay equity in Australia at our current rate, which means it'll be the year 2133 before we achieve pay equity. But look, apart from salary, things actually go okay for young women. Young women typically do quite well, they get into the workforce and they sort of start along their career quite well. But then there's this phenomenon that happens which is called leaning back. So for those who've read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, what we've seen happen at ANZ in particular is women start to lean back before they even meet a man, actually. They think, well, I don't want that kind of job or that kind of career because I probably won't be conducive to trying to manage a family. And so they actually start opting out of certain jobs and certain career paths before they've even got there. There's a few other stats up there that you can see, but a common theme that runs through those is actually it's the parenting and the child rearing that is the biggest career killer for women. It takes them out of the workforce, it interrupts their careers, and it means that they are underemployed quite significantly and often for the rest of their career. And this has real financial implications. So women on average earn $700,000 less than men over their lifetime. That's like a house. Well, it depends what city you live in, an apartment, a room. Australian women spend twice as much time on unpaid work as men. Really frightening, these last two statistics though, is women retire with half as much super, and 37% of women retire with no super at all. That's not funny actually, because that leaves them very, very vulnerable. So, you know, these issues with workforce participation and pay that start so early in the careers of women go on to have very, very significant consequences down the track. So what kind of company would care about these statistics? A bank, because it's our core business, is helping people accumulate wealth and manage their money. So park that thought for a second about women. I'll just have a quick thing to say about disability, which is another area that is really interesting from a business case perspective. So 2.1 million working age Australians have a disability, and 45% of people with disabilities live near or below the poverty line, which is appalling for a country that is as advanced as we are. We're number 21 out of 27 in terms of OECD rankings. We're lower than New Zealand when it comes to participation of people with disability in our workforce. And the thing about disability is it's one of the only areas of discrimination or exclusion that you can kind of inherit as you go through life. Because at 15 years of age, 1 in 13 people have a disability, but by the time you reach 75, it's 1 in 2. So it's something that everybody, you know, could be exposed to at some point in time. So once again, they're another group of people in our society who are not fully participating, either in the workforce, financially, or socially. And once again, banks really care about this because they're all customers and they've got money to manage. So there's really two main reasons that at ANZ why we care about this. Firstly, it's about tapping into the workforce, tapping into the entire talent pool, and women and people with disability form a huge part of that talent pool. And the second is that these people are customers of ours or potential customers of ours, and so we need to understand them and we need to have products and services that meet their needs. 70% of buying decisions are made by women in this country. So a couple of quick examples. How am I going for time? I'm good. Of what we've done about it. So you might have seen in the news recently, actually, ANZ launched a campaign called Equal Future, which is really about starting the social conversation about some of the statistics that I spoke to you about before, and the impact that it's having on women and on their financial viability. And really there's a couple of main reasons why we've done this. Firstly, it's because we actually want to start the conversation. And a bank kind of legitimately can do that. We can talk about wealth creation. We can talk about people being excluded from you know, having the kind of lifestyle that they want because of their financial situation. So we think we can play a role in really challenging the status quo and almost disrupting the conversation. And we don't always get positive press about this, as you can imagine. When we first launched this campaign, I very unfortunately started to read a Facebook feed of what some customers had commented on when they saw that we were starting to talk about this stuff. And it's not all positive. In fact, a lot of it was really very negative and very nasty indeed. But that's part of, you know, our role in terms of influencing society, is to be prepared to have those conversations. It's the same when we launched our GayTMs to celebrate LGBTI. We had loads of customers close their accounts with us, but we were pretty comfortable with that. So the other thing we've done really practically is we're actually paying our female staff extra super to help bring their balances up to where they need to be. And we're also offering free financial advice for women earning less than $50,000 a year. And we're offering that advice outside of normal business hours, because we know these women are probably working all around the clock and they're probably caring for families at the same time. So a couple of really practical things that are aligned completely to our core business and are really understanding the different needs that the particular group has in society. Another example around disability. So the great news about making banking more accessible for people with disability is actually technology. Technology is completely changing the game. Anybody who's got an iPhone now, who's blind, their whole life has changed because their iPhone talks to them and tells them everything that they need to know. So we've proactively thought about how can we make banking more accessible for our customers who have different needs, and there's just one example up on the screen. If you can tell, on that card on the left-hand side, there's raised tactile dots that actually help the customer find the different types of credit card and then orient it appropriately in the ATM machine. Such a simple thing, but actually it makes a really big difference to customers. And what we've also found is that the universal design concepts that you use when you're creating accessible products actually make products good for everybody. If you can think about making things as simple as possible, as intuitive as possible, it actually benefits a lot of customers. Oh, okay, the timer went off, goodness. The other thing about disability that I think is really interesting to think about is this concept of the halo effect. And the halo effect actually applies to a lot of the business case for diversity, and that is that even though customers might not actually need these accessibility features that I've been speaking about, the fact that your brand or your company offers them makes people feel good about your brand, because they think, that's good that there's a bank out there or a supermarket out there that's actually looking after those customers. There's a really great example of this. I don't know if anybody's ever seen, there's an Apple ad for FaceTime and an iPad, and there's these two people speaking using sign language on an iPad using FaceTime. And it's a beautiful, everyone cries when they watch it, it's a really beautiful ad. But that product wasn't made for deaf people, but it has this amazing power to change the lives of deaf people actually. So that the halo effect is really, really important and something to think about. So, they're just really a couple of examples that I hope help to demonstrate the business case around why do companies really care about this. I think some of the other speakers are going to talk more about the employee proposition and the war for talent, and I really wanted to focus on the business case for customers, because I think any organisation that has a client base that reflects all aspects of society can really unlock significant value from this agenda, particularly if you're first and you get in early. So finally, what are my sort of 3 tips? Because it's always good to finish with 3 tips. The first one is find the relevance for your business. So what's the thing that's relevant for your business? And sometimes it's not the obvious thing, but the first thing to do is to really understand the data, understand where exclusion is happening, talk to your customers, talk to your staff about what your products and services and proposition might be like for people who are different than the typical customer. And of course that's the benefit of having the second key enabler, which is a diverse workforce, because if you've got a diverse workforce, they will bring those perspectives into your business automatically, and they will bring that experience and those ideas that those different customers are looking for. And then finally, and probably the most difficult thing to do, is to actually create a culture of inclusive leadership where people can work in your organisation and feel that their difference is valued and understood, but they also feel like they belong and they can contribute. And I think that's a really tough balance. I think you need to move beyond diversity for diversity's sake, stop counting the women, how many people in wheelchairs can we see, and actually move to the idea of inclusion, which is that everybody's actually unique and different, and they all bring a really interesting and unique perspective, and leaders play a key role in creating a culture where people can be their best. Thank you.